One Israel Fund, beating to the rhythm of the heartland, enhancing and securing daily life in the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria for over 25 years. Join us and make a difference. Hi, everyone. Eve Harow, the Director of Tourism and Community Development for One Israel Fund. Welcome to the latest in our series of webinars, and I hope that you haven't missed them. Today is September 13th, 2021, the 28th anniversary, if you will, maybe commemoration would be a better word, of the Declaration of Principles that led to the Oslo Accords, something that we are still majorly suffering from these days. And it's also the 7th day of Tishrei in our new year. Today was also the third anniversary, I suppose, of the burial of Ari Fuld. And of course, it being Israel, I went to the cemetery today. I was asked by the family, and about 5 minutes after I passed Gush Etzion Junction, there was an attempted stabbing, and the usual, and our neighbors and our locals are still trying to do whatever they can to take us away from our homeland. And so our series of webinars have been doing what we can to connect you with our homeland, and especially the biblical heartland of our homeland, and also the virtual tours that we've been putting out once a month, going into different communities in Yehuda Shomron, Jordan Valley, and meeting with someone and talking about that. I was just in the Jordan Valley yesterday, very proud of some of the projects that we've managed to do despite the pandemic and despite the fact that people really haven't been able to come here and visit and see what we're about, and playgrounds, and it's just amazing what we've been able to accomplish. I'm so grateful. And if those of you remember, listen to the last webinar, we spoke about the sabbatical year, about the Shemitah, and one of the things that we were able to do just in the last couple of weeks is take some money that wasn't earmarked. I love when I'm given money that's not earmarked and I can decide what to do with it, and create some gardens, plant some trees, put in the infrastructure for watering systems in a couple of different communities that couldn't afford to do them. We did it right before the sabbatical year, since now they can't plant, and the kids will have shade, and in the parks and the homes and fruit trees. And it was really a joy to be able to do that. So I really want to thank all of those who partner with us, who enable us to do these things. And if you haven't yet become part of the greater One Israel family, we certainly invite you to join us. And I'm delighted to have with us this evening one of the better known archaeologists here in Israel. And I love archaeologists, not just because I'm studying it this year, but because they're just such real people. And it's an amazing opportunity to be able to talk to one of the few academics who is allowed or does dig in Yehuda Shomron, and we'll talk about why that is. Dr. Shay, who is associated with Haifa University. He's a teacher, and for many decades already has been focusing specifically on what many of you probably know is the Northern Shomron, in biblical terms, the area of the tribe of Menashe, and of course down into the Jordan Valley as well. So Shay, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about, what it is that you do. What is it that you do as an archaeologist?
Well,
you can just go pick a place and go dig there?
Well, I wish, but that's not always that simple. As an archaeologist, apart from teaching and educating the new generation of students that will be archaeologists in the future, hopefully, I focus on two methods of archaeology: the archaeological survey and archaeological excavations. And I do both of them, and I do both of them in one of the less explored areas of Israel, which is, as you said, the Shomron and the Jordan Valley. I've been a student of the late Professor Adam Zartal, who's very known from discovering the altar on Mount Ebal and other very interesting sites. I did a PhD, he was my supervisor, and I'm continuing in his footsteps, literally walking.
Literally his footsteps.
Yes. Walking the entire area of Samaria and the Jordan Valley in a project that commenced in 1978 and is still ongoing. It's actually the largest archaeological project in the world, called the Menashe.
Really?
In 1978, everybody just think where he was in 1978. I was in mid school. When Adam started, when the late Adam Zartal started this. And I joined him about 15, 16 years ago. And since then, we've been walking until he passed away 5 years ago. in Samaria and in the Jordan Valley, discovering thousands of new sites from the beginning of mankind in the region till World War I camps. So we have them everything.
So since you mentioned the late Adam Zertal, someone who I literally followed around, and I was in touch with you actually a few years ago when I put together a presentation of his work for a conference that I was at in Limud, and you were very generous and helped me with a lot of things that I needed to fill in. But you mentioned the difference between archaeological surveys and archaeological excavations. And one of the things that he did that really turned it around is he didn't just go to a site and start digging at the site, but he looked at the context of the place, and he had his students walk around and see what else is around. Where is the water source? Where are the mountains? Where are the valleys? What else is going around that would cause people to settle there, cause people to leave there, whatever it was? Is that something that you follow? Because you talk about this major project in Menashe. Is that a methodology of his that you have continued as well in your work?
Yes, definitely. We are looking very through at the geology, geomorphology, water, road system, everything to understand why people settled in the region in different periods, and especially to see when were the periods of the peak of habitation in the region and when there were periods that the area was virtually uninhabited. A good example is the Jordan Valley. For example, that when you look at the period that we call the late Bronze Age, like something like 15th, 14th century BCE, this area is completely deserted. Nobody is living in the Jordan Valley. And when you look at the next period, 13th, mainly 12th century BCE, that's the period we call Iron Age 1.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at these two things archaeologically, I can suggest this is immigration. Somebody immigrated to the region. Now, this is the time when supposedly in the Bible, the people of Israel crossed the Jordan River and entered Canaan near Jericho.
Right.
So they entered an almost empty land and they resettled it. And we have proof of that in the archaeological survey, which is something very. And when we look at the type of settlements that we find from the Iron Age one in the Jordan Valley, these are all nomadic encampments. And when you read the Bible, the people of Israel were nomadic because they were just going through the desert all these years. They were nomads. So it's very interesting.
So you've touched on a very interesting point that I'm sure my listeners would like a little bit elaborated, because we're kind of inundated with biblical criticism, and it's for a lot of different reasons. It's not just for religious reasons. A lot of this is political also. If people can somehow prove, as it were, that this never happened and the Israelites never came in, then some of our modern day claim perhaps to the land of Israel doesn't have any basis. So there are a lot of ramifications to what's happening here. But as an archaeologist, when you go into the field, I know that the Tanakh, I know the Bible is with you, not necessarily as a religious book, but because it gives a tremendous number of clues, yes, as to like if people settled in the hills or the valleys or where exactly they were. How does that work? Because you're a scientist. So how does that combination work for you? And I know it's a challenge for very many archaeologists, whether they wear a kippah, don't wear a kippah, whatever they do in their private lives is very much separate from their academic and from their scientific work. So if you could share with us, if it's not too personal, how you pull those things together for yourself.
Well, first thing, I'm an academic, and there are academic levels of behavior, and that's what it's a method of conduct that we have to continue and support the facts for our claim. What do you think? The thing is that this region, Samaria and the Jordan Valley, was not explored previous to our work. I mean, when we look at the survey, 85% of the sites that we document are new, were never explored before in all the periods of habitation. This means that we are rewriting the history of the region. Now, so first thing is the facts. For example, we have many nomadic encampments in the Jordan Valley in an area that was empty before in the Canaanite periods. Now, this is facts. Now we can assume, we suggest that these are the Israelites crossing the Jordan, the example I gave you. Somebody might say, well, this is far-fetched. Do you have anything else to show me? These are the facts. Can you explain who these were? I had a talk with a very nice professor from Tel Aviv University, I won't mention his name, and he said, okay, maybe these are the people that are the nomadic, how do you say, nomadic circulation of the Canaanite city in the Bet Shean Valley. Because in the Bet Shean Valley, there were Canaanite city even after Israel entered Canaan. For example, Bet Shean and Rehov and other cities.
Right.
And Edo, if you go to the Jezreel Valley, etc., which were not conquered by Joshua or a thing. So maybe this is the nomadic component of these cities. But I say we are 30, 40 kilometers afar. And this settlement that we see is not reaching the area of the Bet Shean Valley or the Jezreel Valley. It's something that's occurring north of Jericho in a very restricted area. It's like somebody came north of Jericho and entered there. Now, you can say it's not the Israelites, Bibles, mythology or everything, but please.
And who is it?
Who are these?
Right.
They're not Canaanites, this is for sure. They don't have the Canaanite culture. They are nomadic populations. Canaanite, most of them are city dwellers. And they have their specific material culture that is not presented in these nomadic encampments. So who were they? So this is how we tackle it. But we have a strong opposition. That's true. This strong opposition comes from scholars who are not willing to accept the facts or are not reading all the data, because archaeology has lots and lots of data and you have to choose.
Right.
And we have a lot of problem because it's very hard to publish things from Samaria and the Jordan Valley.
Why is that?
Why is it? Because according to you mentioned the Oslo agreements, and according to the Hague Convention, archaeological work is not, except for salvage excavation, is not supposed to be in areas conquered by a specific regime versus the local population. This is what the Hague Convention mentions. Now, according to the Oslo Agreement, the area of Samaria and Judean Samaria is divided to area A, B, and C.
Right.
Now, what I'm talking is happening in area C, which is completely Israeli controlled, both governmentally and military control. And we don't have anyone else to ask, only the Israeli government to get access to work on it. So we are caught. On one hand, we can do the research because we have a license from our government, the Israeli government, because this is area C in the agreement with the Palestinian authorities. I cannot work in area A, which is under Palestinian control. Okay, this might be a big problem, but I cannot, and I'm not working there. I'm not allowed.
For example, Nablus, Shem, which is an incredible place. Yeah.
For example. And I'm working in the suburbs just right now, serving the suburbs of Shem, but I cannot enter Shem itself. But the bigger problem is that I cannot publish, because most of the journals won't accept papers or books that I write, because they are not in accordance with the Oslo Agreement. This is a catch-22 situation. I'm the only university-backed archaeologist working in Samaria for so many years. All my friends
that's amazing.
Stop doing this because they cannot publish. If they cannot publish, then they perish, publish or perish. This is the famous.
Yeah, well, then your reputation as an archaeologist isn't known internationally if you can't publish what you're doing.
For example, I cannot go and lecture in America or in Europe about very interesting and important finds that we have in Jordan Valley and Samaria, concern the emergence of the Israel people or other periods and things. They won't let me. I cannot publish.
Wait, who is they? Let's say someone is listening, and I have really outstanding listeners and people who follow us. Let's say they're in Texas and they have a community and they want to hear from you. Can they invite you privately to come?
Oh, yeah. Yes, of course, they can. Well,
take note of that, people.
Not in the time of the pandemic, maybe, but they can.
For example, leaving that aside, there's always something, isn't there? Okay. But it's not like it's not illegal. They can invite you as a private archaeologist to come.
Yes, of course. And they can purchase our books and they can support us if they want. And everything. Because we are doing very important thing, because we are now actually in the last years, I can say that we're salvaging a lot of data, because I see sites that we've published a few years ago, and they are already non-existent. Either completely looted by Palestinian looters, or a massive development, building roads, building infrastructure, building new neighborhoods in mostly Palestinian cities, not only, and villages, which is very important for their community, but without archaeological supervision, which means that many sites get destroyed.
This would never be allowed in any other situation.
I've just received a text saying that there is a big work by a group working on salvaging sites in Samaria, and they checked 365 sites, and 80% of them were either completely destroyed or partly destroyed.
Wow.
And that's terrible, because that's destroying the everything for everyone, for all the people that ever.
It's destroying history that can't be brought back.
The question of Jews or Muslims or ethnicity is just destroying archaeology. And this is something we are trying to fight. We are excavating some of these sites that are hurt by the looters. We are writing on this. We are publishing all the data available we have. But it is said true that many sites get destroyed, and I see it, and especially since like a year and a half since the pandemic, the looting of sites is increased by at least 300%, and we can see it on a weekly basis. And I'm there in the field, and I see sometimes looters in action.
Why is that? Because there's even fewer people from the Israeli government. I know that there are very few to begin with. Inspectors, I forgot the word in English, inspectors who come and try and catch the looters.
Until less than a few months, there was only, I think, 2 inspectors for entire Samaria, which is a giant area with more than 10,000 sites. Now I'm very glad to hear that they got the budget for another one, or another 2. But it's like they can leave a site, and 5 minutes later the robbers rob it, and they do what they can. They do fantastic work, and they stop a lot of destruction, but they're just
there aren't enough of them. And I mean, for those who are unaware, in an archaeological site, even if they just disrupt the site, if they're looking for coins and don't find them, but even just the upheaval of the ground, because the layers in the ground are what tell the story of what came first and what came afterwards and why people left or what was destroyed. And even so, just digging a site, even if they're not finding something gold and stealing it, and that's also terrible, of course, means that in terms of science, that site is very now, let's say, unreliable in terms of the information that you come up with. It's just, I mean, there really are no words, because like you said, it's humanity's knowledge, it's humanity's treasure that the Israelis are trying to bring out. And as you said, irrespective of it's connected to Judaism or not, we get just as excited when we find a Byzantine church mosaic as we do with anything else. Some of them are beautiful, and they're fixed up and made viewing for the public. And it's really it's such a privilege to be able to do what you do. I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for you to see some of these places just ruined forever.
I can give you an example if you want.
Please.
I'll just share screen. I'll just show you something.
Okay.
And this is a site that like in Samaria. It's called Dahar Marzebana. And actually, just to start, the research at the site I started in August 2020. And that was a terrible August 2020, not only because of the pandemic, which was terrible in Israel at the time, and people didn't go out except for the looters. But this is just a small example of looted graves and sites in Samaria in the 2 weeks in August 2020. Just something fast that I collected from aerials and ground visits. Later, of course, in January, when we will speak later about the Mount Ebal site and the part of the destruction that occurred there.
Joshua's altar, yeah.
Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal, yes, the Mount Ebal site. This is the destruction that occurred to this wall at the site. And again, and you can see here, the site that I'm speaking here is the map. I'm sorry, it's in Hebrew, but this is the site. And this is the largest Bronze Age cemetery in Samaria and one of the largest in the Levant.
Really?
It was
Wow.
it was only little salvage excavated because of looters. But you can see this is the road called the Alon Road. You can see it here and here. And you
Oh,
can
I
see
know where you are. Okay.
Looted tombs everywhere. You can see all these holes are shaft tombs. And you can see here in the pictures all these small dots. They are not nice trees, but they are tombs. And we counted 1,600 looted tombs on these sites.
Oh my goodness.
And this looting is going on. And a high hill above this looted cemetery, looted Bronze Age cemetery, was a very famous tumulus, the largest tumulus in Samaria. Tumulus is a big pile of man-made heap of stones that is usually covering the grave of an important person or an important building. And this is the largest one in Samaria. And this was actually documented in the survey and published in, as you see, just a year before what we talked about in 2019. We've just published it. You can see it when it was still okay. It's 30 meters wide and 11 meters high. Very important structure. And this is another aerial photography of this structure before destruction, when we just documented it. And we came to a return visit to the site. We do it usually, we come twice to each site.
Wow.
And this is what we found out. It was completely destroyed, looted, demolished by robbers, by either grave robbers or archaeological robbers, and you can see the destruction.
Literal grave robbers. Wow.
That's terrible. Complete destruction to the site, and also to the small village, Bronze Age village that was there just on the side. You can see everywhere it's looting activities by these looters who are Palestinian, probably from, if the glove is correct, from Hebron area. And this is terrible. So we decided that the Menashe Hill Country Survey will focus more on salvaging data, so that we decided that we will focus now mainly on publishing and salvaging data. And we have here 5 excavation projects that we started. You can see the lower one is the Hamas, the site that I was talking about right now. Other site excavated in Samaria, a bit that nobody is willing to help us or publish what we do, but we do it because it's salvaging important data from different periods. This is from the end of the Iron Age, probably a Babylonian destruction of a Judean.
Wow. That's the first temple. That's the first temple, right? That time period.
Just before the destruction, probably even destroyed by the Babylonians on the way to Jerusalem.
Wow.
Before the destruction, yes, very, very important site. The northernmost Judean occurrence in Samaria, maybe starting from the days of the reforms of Yeshayahu in the 7th century. Very important site that is partly destroyed, and we are salvaging it. In the Fatsael Valley, in the Jordan Valley, we excavate another site which is earlier but very important in the beginning of metallurgical activities in the region. Telesur is something that I'm that's why I wake up every morning now at 4 a.m. to go and excavate there. This is an ongoing excavation that I now excavate the entire month in the Wadi Ara region in western Samaria, the entry to the Sharon plain, and the foot-shaped enclosures. Also, we're excavating these, trying to salvage more and more data. You can see here the map of the survey area, all the area between
Menashe.
the Israel Valley, Bet Shean Valley, all the area of Menashe and the Jordan Valley to the Dead Sea. All this was one fruit. So we're doing our best to salvage all this very important data and heritage of humans here in the region, which is, as you know, of course, very important. And when you look at the Bible, for example, this is where everything happened, or most of the things happened in Judea and Samaria. And they're neglecting it archaeologically because of being under fierce attack of BDS and other very good friends of ours. It is a very big problem that's sabotaging careers of people, of very few people who try to salvage their archaeological data. And I think that we are doing actually a salvage operation, a very long salvage operation, trying to salvage what we can from Samaria, and this is very sad.
Mhm.
It's a tragedy.
It really, there is no other word for that, and there are so many people who will do anything to save some butterfly, right? Like they won't let some area be developed because there's some butterfly in the field that they want to save. But here you have priceless, there's just really no other words for priceless treasures, not necessarily in the value of the thing, the knowledge that it gives us, not necessarily in the inherent value of the thing itself, that is just being destroyed every single day. And some of the people who would be on the forefront of, political correctness or whatever it is, are not only not taking up the fight, but are probably would be on the side of encouraging those who want to destroy it and destroy our connection. It's just, it's appalling in every single way. One of the most interesting places, at least for me, and I love guiding it also, is Sebastia or Shomron, what was the capital of the Shomron. And that is in that area where you're digging as well. And the last time I was there, and this is a place that was excavated by a Harvard expedition already over 100 years ago, under the Ottomans, that would be, and came up with just incredible finds. The names of the daughters of Slofchad from the biblical names, showing that their homesteads were still active hundreds of years after the conquest. Just outrageous, wonderful finds. But that area is also, there's an Arab village there. They're building on top of the site. They're stealing all the time. And this is kind of a theme.
The fact that although the site itself is Area C, which is Israeli complete jurisdiction, going there, the army usually won't let you. And if they let you, it's with a convoy. Because it passes
that's how to get there.
Village, which is Area A. And this is a very good example, because this is probably one of the most important archaeological sites of Samaria and of Israel. And I visited also a few months ago there, and it's just being destroyed.
It makes your heart sick.
There are graffiti everywhere of the Islamic Jihad and everything. The church, there's the church there. On the entrance of the church, there's a big graffiti of the Islamic Jihad now. And the theater, they destroyed part of it, and it's devastating, and it's very sad.
Another thing
it's the heart of Israel, and you cannot visit it.
Right. Yeah. It really is the heart of Israel. I mean, everybody just saw the map right now. It's another thing to write to the government about, that when they fix all the other things that are going wrong, maybe they can deal with this. But you know what? I don't think this is any less important than many of the other things that ideological stands, if you will, but it shouldn't even be ideological. This should be really a scientific issue. And it shouldn't have to do with where Green Line is or not Green Line or who lives anywhere. This is really plundering world history.
I can admit, although there are people listening, but I can admit that I'm not a right-wing Israeli voter. I'm in the middle. I never was, and I'm not religious, but I'm an archaeologist, and I see what's happening there. And this destruction of heritage for all people is devastating. It's the destruction of biblical sites. It's destruction of sites mentioned in the New Testament. It's destruction of all kinds of sites. Even Muslim sites are being destroyed by looters. Fewer, but some are. And just the heritage of the region is being destroyed because people are not doing what they should. And this is salvaging data. The fact that I am personally hurt by that, boycotted, actually, that's the right word. I am boycotted. I cannot go and speak and publish and everything. And it's like there is a big cross near my name in many institutions. And that's very sad, because I think that I'm not a very bad archaeologist, and I think that what I'm doing is salvaging the data, which is much more important than going and excavate another site in Israel, which will give more data, but this data won't be destroyed if it's not excavated. Here we are salvaging the data.
Right. Look, I remember Adam Zertal, who was also raised in a very secular kibbutz and Shemer completely said he didn't even know about the Bible until his adulthood. And he came to believe in the book of Joshua because of the science, and was also very much boycotted and not respected the way he should have been because of exactly what you're going through as well, because of where he was digging. And he was told he was the settler's archaeologist. And he said the word in Hebrew is shtuyot, which translates to like, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. He said, I'm following the science and I'm finding what I'm finding. And it's not because of my background. And it's not because of any kind of trying to prove a point. I'm just being true to what I'm finding in the field. And he was also, of course, not allowed to speak in many places or publish. So how do you get students for your digs, given all the difficulties and all the controversy? Are these your archaeological students in the university? When people sign up to earn the degree, then they have to go out and dig with you? Do you get people from other places? How does that technically go about? I know I should tell my audience that you've been up since 4:30 this morning, because if they didn't hear you say that before, because that's what you do in archaeology. And I've done that more than once, to get there early, dig in the morning, break a little bit. And then by 1 o'clock, when the sun is high in the sky, it's time to wash the pottery and see what you found. But really, where do you draw your diggers from? Your students?
Well, there are two answers to this question, because there's the survey and the excavations. Everything is combined, but then it's not the same people actually. In the excavations, most of them are students, because people understand that excavating in Judean and Samaria is very important. The sites are very important. We have fantastic results from these excavations. It's breakthrough because nobody is working there. We can choose what we want to research, what period.
It's amazing.
We do. Yes, it's like a small child in a candy shop. Sometimes I feel like
just
this.
Do whatever you want.
Like this, I want to do this seems important. This is so it's something that is maybe like this in an imaginative idea,
right? Theoretically,
and I'm the only one who's doing it. All the others maybe go here and excavate. I excavate several sites that you've seen salvaging these sites, and I have students that come, and I have volunteers that come for many years now. And sometimes we have foreign volunteers that come, foreign archaeology students that come and support us. Of course, not relevant.
Oh, you do have foreign volunteers?
Yes,
okay.
Because those
Very
who come,
nice.
I don't want to brag, but those who come and excavate with me, they have such a good time that they want to come back. And
I'm sure they do.
And they fly Wizz Air or EasyJet, and in $15 they fly to Israel, which is
right.
much more today with the prices of air from Europe to Israel, for example, for European students, that it's very cheap for them. Sometimes they come for a week of excavation and go back. They don't even go to Tel Aviv or visit, just come to the excavation. Of course, not the last 2 years because of the COVID pandemic, but this what happened before. And then there is the group of the survey. Group of the survey is based on volunteers that come. I inherited some of them from the late Adam Zertal because I was part of the team, and they of course stayed with me when he passed away. And they are not archaeologists, most of them. Some of them did a degree in archaeology after being in the survey. And some of them are participating in the survey for more than 20 years. So it's a very expert team. They are very good, although they are not archaeologists, they are a very expert team. We are laughing, we call ourselves the geriatric survey.
Geriatric. Okay.
Because I think that the mid age is like 70, 65 now. They were younger when we started, but
wasn't everybody. Yes.
Group, and we are not in a hurry. We walk slowly and discover things. So this is the other thing, and it's all based on volunteers, because without them, we couldn't do anything.
Right. Well, you don't have the budget. You don't have a budget for.
We cannot have budgets. Raising money for this project is very problematic again, because nobody from abroad, from universities or institutions, will give money to such a project. Only we have private donors. And also in Israel, it's a very problematic area to raise money from. And it's very difficult. We have the Israel Science Foundation, for example, which is a very important foundation to give money for academic projects in every aspect of us speaking about archaeology projects. And they have a nice amount of money every year for different projects. But you write a very, very big application form, and then you send it, and then they send it to 5 judges, which is okay. But it's enough that one of these 5 judges is not thinking that Israel should work in Samaria, Israeli archaeologists. It's always
That's
happening.
it.
And that's it. He will find something that this specific application won't succeed, and this is happening again and again. And it's just, I've stopped asking money from the Israel Science Foundation and from similar institutions, not because of the Israel Science Foundation, they're great, giving money to academic research, but because they send it outside to judges and then to external readers and referees. And then, you know, the academic world is not much supportive of our efforts in Samaria, unfortunately, and it's a waste of time. I'd rather write a few chapters of a book or 2 papers at the same time and the same amount of time. So actually, we have some supporters which help us work, but they are few, and it's very difficult. It's actually, and that's why we base ourselves on volunteers.
I'm thinking maybe now that we have the Abraham Accords, maybe there's actually somebody open-minded who loves archaeology and just wants to learn about the history of the region in, I don't know, Abu Dhabi or somewhere, who, don't know. You know what? The world is such a strange place. Can you imagine?
I wouldn't say no.
The
For
Dubai-sponsored
Menashe
Project.
I think it's so important that I never say no.
Yeah, and why should you? It could be very cool.
You know, it's very important.
And how about your university? They're supportive of the work, Haifa University?
Yes, you know, for excavations in Israel and surveys, you have to be university backed, meaning you have to have a university, an official in one of the 6 universities in Israel that supports your work and responsible that you will do it according to the law and publish everything, etc. And my home university in Haifa is doing this. They never said no.
Wow, so that's great.
That's great.
Okay, and Ariel University in the Shomron doesn't have that standing yet to be able to do that?
I mean, the Haifa University, this is something you have to ask the Archaeological University, but they also work.
They're also boycotted. Their lecturers in every.
In Samaria. Right. But also they have the same problem. They cannot lecture. They find it hard to publish, etc. They have the same problems. If they work in Samaria, not all of their researchers work in Samaria. Some work in other sites, not in Samaria, nor Judean Samaria. So they're not boycotted. But it depends.
So I'd like to spend the last few minutes on the positive. So tell us about some of the things that you found. I don't know if you have your most, you know, the thing that excited you the most, or your favorite find. It's probably not a fair question. But in the last couple of decades, like what have you, something that perhaps surprised you that you didn't expect, you know, to find, let's say, collar rim jars in an Iron Age site? Okay, that might be something that you anticipated, but you know, what can you share with us that?
Well, we
really,
have some few surprise sites, I call them. For example, when I started to work in Fatsael Valley, we went to a site called Fatsael 2, which is in the Jordan Valley, north of Jericho. And I excavated it as part of my PhD. It was like
a while ago.
Years ago, not that much, but quite a while ago, yeah. And I'm it's ongoing. I mean, every February I go there to this site and continue excavating. And when we started just because the site was destroyed. The site was partly destroyed, and we said, okay, I'm doing this PhD on the Jordan Valley in this specific time period. I want to excavate. They decide to salvage the things, and it turned out to be a very, very important site. I think one of the most important sites from the Chalcolithic and Early Bronze periods, including very interesting jar burials that we CT scanned in order to discover what's inside, and we discovered.
What? So there were skeletons inside the jars?
Yes, and they were complete.
Wow.
Since we had the complete jars, we found them buried below the floors of the building, the structures of the site. And so we took them to Philips in Haifa, the CT scanner company. And we went there and we scanned them at midnight because they were not allowed to do it in regular times because they were doing processing. And then we saw the body of the small boy or girl just appearing in the CT scan, and we did a lot of
Wow.
research and additional research. I mean, there was even a film in the National Geographic about this discovery. This was something very unique. And then it turned out that this specific site was very important in the manufacturing of copper, at the beginning of metals in the Levant.
Really? Huh.
Most important sites in some aspect that is now being researched with collaboration with other universities. So it just began with, let's salvage this site, it's being destroyed. So this is one example. And another example is, again, the site of Manasseh that I talked earlier. We came there, we thought this is a site from the Iron Age of the post-Assyrian destruction of Samaria,
Okay.
which occurred in the 8th century BCE, and the destruction of the Kingdom of Israel.
Right. What people know is the 10 tribes being exiled, which is a little superficial. It was a lot more complicated, but yeah.
Yes, very well.
It was bad.
Much complicated.
It was bad. Yeah.
No, but that was an area that's supposed to be uninhabited and partly destroyed and everything. And we found this flourishing site that continued to exist until the 6th century, the Babylonian destruction. This is very important because we know almost nothing on the beginning of the 6th century, because we have very few Babylonian destruction layers. And this is probably one. And again, this started because of the site being partly destroyed and looted, and we wanted to salvage the data. And again, surprise, surprise, new findings. And this is happening everywhere. And this is happening even in the last days of the survey, when we were walking in the Jordan Valley, just north of Jericho. And we discovered several camps that we started to do research in them, looked modern camps, and it turned out that these are World War I camps of the New Zealand Light Cavalry Brigade. We managed to even to connect a specific unit to the camp, which is very nice. And we worked on this camp, and we collected lots of finds from this camp. And this is World War I. This is yesterday in archaeological, especially in Israel, in archaeological meanings. But this was very important because, again, in a return visit to the site, it turned out that it was plowed by a local Palestinian, and most of the site is now destroyed. So at least we were able to salvage some of the data. We will contact the New Zealand embassy and give them the data and give them the information about the site, because it's very important for people who fought there in World War I. So we have all from prehistoric periods to World War I, finding sites. Every time we go to Jordan Valley, we find new sites, we find new things. And unfortunately, sometimes we have bad information because sites are being destroyed.
What have you found that would maybe resonate for those who are interested in the Bible? I mean, in addition to obviously Joshua's altar, which was huge on Mount Ebal, that was totally unexpected, literally stumbled onto it, weren't looking for it, not where it was expected to be, etc. Are there other sites like that? Because and it's something that it's on my head right now because I'm working on a report having to do with the time of the judges in Yavesh Gilad, and it's very hard because there aren't what we would now consider typical Jewish symbols. You don't have, let's say, a slot for the mezuzah on the door. You don't have a ritual bath. You don't have the things that now we would look at and say, this looks like Israelites or Jews lived here. Way back then, it was information. So how do you try and figure out if it's belonged to what some people would call the Highland culture, or the Israelite culture?
Well, ethnicity is a very big problem in archaeology, especially as you go back in time. But for example, we have a group of sites that we call the foot-shaped enclosures. That means that these are sites, nomadic sites of the same population that I've talked about. Iron Age one site of this population entering the Jordan Valley from somewhere. Okay, maybe cross the Jordan, maybe they come from New York.
Maybe after 40 years in the desert, maybe. Okay, we'll throw that in there. Okay.
Just entering the region. And they built typical enclosures that are unique. We don't find them anywhere else in the ancient world, in the Middle East, with the shape of a foot. We call them the foot-shaped enclosures. And this is a project, a big project by the late Professor Adam Zertal.
Right.
And he identified these foot ship enclosures as the biblical Gilgalim sites, which are the Iron Age cultic and gathering sites of the early Israelites in Canaan. That's where they circumcised the people from the desert in Jericho, Gilgal.
Right.
That's where Shmuel crowned Shaul, one of the crownations of Shaul. That's where Ehud ben Gera went in the Judges period to fight his enemies. That's where Shmuel is said to be judging the people of Israel in the Gilgal. Now, until now, there was, except for a modern kibbutz named Gilgal, and the Byzantine sites just near Jericho with no Iron Age or Bronze Age remains. So that's just something that somebody invented in the Byzantine period. The Gilgal, but it's not the Gilgal. Now we have a few sites called Gilgal, or of these enclosure sites, and we think, and from the same period, and that's because we were the only one who actually walked literally all the area meter by meter mapping. We have these sites. These are connected to the nomadic sites that just surround them. It's like the local center of these smaller sites. And these are the Gilgal sites, the first religious sites actually of ancient Israel that are mentioned in Joshua and Judges. Actually, not afterwards, because of when David moved to Jerusalem, he banned other religious activities.
Right.
So
this is before Jerusalem becomes the place. It's different places until then. And there are altars in them, and there are bones of kosher animals and the pottery of the period.
No. One of them has something that looks like an altar.
Okay.
The others are just very big enclosures, like 10 to 15 in size larger than the smaller encampments that are for the local nomadic population. And they are all located beneath a natural proto-theater, we call it, where people can gather and assemble and see what's happening inside. Some of them have paved paths that circulate the entire site. It's very, very interesting.
It's fabulous.
Very, very interesting. And actually, every year now I go and I do a small excavation season in each of them, just to see if we can better date the various aspects of every site and to do more research.
And there are many instances in the Bible of the term raglecha, the term your feet, denoting God's presence, denoting conquest, all kinds of different references. I have the whole list. It's amazing.
Yeah, all in different meaning, because God is dwelling in his footsteps. This is said in Yeshayahu. He's dwelling in his footsteps, and we have no footsteps.
Literally.
Footsteps. So maybe that's where God is dwelling. So it's an amazing discovery.
It's one of the most, I think it's one of the most interesting theories and finds. And from what I understand, also you and he went to the biblical text, and based on the biblical text, looked for another one and found it where you thought it might be, near Rimonim, off the Alon Road, if I'm not mistaken.
This is a project led and then suggested and by Adam Zertal. I'm just continuing in his footsteps.
Yes.
Footsteps, better dating the sites, doing more archaeological research, not just a survey.
Right. But it gives a whole new meaning to the text. I mean, we read the text and we don't always take it literally. We figure, okay, it's terminology. But the fact is that there was also kind of that idea in Egypt, right? That the feet connoted presence or conquering, and it could be a presence, and it could be that a people who were familiar with the Egyptian context of things are the ones that built that. So maybe that's another connection to where these people came from. And the whole thing is just absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad that you are continuing his work and, of course, doing your own work with your students. And I'm so sad that you're not getting the recognition outside of Israel that you really deserve, because, I mean, being an archaeologist is one thing, but being an archaeologist and not being able to publish, it, has to be so incredibly frustrating, both on a personal level, because everybody wants to get the kudos that are due to them for the hard work that they do, but also it's something that we're all missing and we don't even know we're missing it. I read other archaeological reports from different universities from all around the world. And what you are doing, which I'm so connected to in every single way, the history of the area of Menashe and the Jordan Valley is cut off for reasons that are really just inexplicable and unforgivable in many ways. And I know I shouldn't say that in this time period of the year, but there are certain things that need to be repaired. And you and I can't do it, but perhaps some different powers that be can understand what's wrong here. And for all of us, for all of my listeners, and for many of the people beyond who don't even know what they're missing, maybe something will happen here and there'll be a change. And the next time I interview you, you'll be so excited because you're invited to this big conference to present this incredible find that just shook everybody up. And that would be really, really great. So Dr. Shaibar, thank you so much for sharing the joys and the frustrations of what you do. And I hope that you continue to do it for a long time and train others, to follow in your footsteps, to keep up the work as difficult as it might be, and that the looters find something else to do and leave us all alone for the future. And I want to thank my listeners and viewers, and I want to thank, of course, Cyril, who got all this together behind the scenes. So thanks once again. And as I said, continue to connect with us, One Israel Fund. You can go onto our website, see the other webinars that we've done with some really cool people. And as I said, the virtual videos and the projects that we're involved with. And that in the coming year, first of all, it should be a year of health and of peace for everybody. And maybe the good guys can get over the bad guys this year in a very, very simplistic sense. But we all have to do what we have to do as individuals, and then hopefully the bigger picture will look different. Eve Harow, Director of Tourism and Community Development for One Israel Fund. For those of you for whom it's relevant, Gemar Chatima Tova, an easy and a meaningful fast on Yom Kippur. And may we all be signed in the book of life and health and good things for the coming year. Dr. Shaibar, thank you so much again. Take care, everybody, and goodbye for now.